Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, people of all fandoms, welcome to the Ferret and Raccoon podcast, episode 141. I am your one and only host on this podcast, the Angry Raccoon, bringing you the second podcast of May 2020, and we're almost at the halfway point of 2020, which is quite scary when you consider the fact that the world has been in still a pretty unpredictable and weird and, to some extent, very scary position as we enter, well, at the time of this podcast going up, the 9th week, at least for England, going into its COVID-19 lockdown situation. And interestingly enough, I know especially England and a lot of other countries have started to begin opening up in terms of like jobs and shops and stuff like that, which hasn't exactly been a positive outcome, I guess you could say, given that a lot of sales from some shops that have opened up have been significantly poor. But we'll see what happens in the future. I don't think this is us really coming out of the end of it, but coming away from this whole situation that's going on in the world, because I'm pretty sure you didn't come to this podcast just to hear more updates and highlights on the world right now. Just merely me archiving what 2020 was like, which, for the record, was not fun. But let's talk about some of the things I did over the last fortnight and since the previous podcast. I've mainly been organizing things because, as I already stated, I might be going back to work soon or getting new jobs, which is pretty cool. And I wanted to make sure that I got some things done and dusted and out the way. First few steps, I know this doesn't really sound like work, but at least I managed to get it done during said given free time. I went through Resident Evil 3 Remake. I essentially platinumed the game, getting every trophy, and pretty much completed every challenge. I did everything in the game, so I really did get my money's worth. I also finally got all the trophies in Crash Team Racing Nitro Fueled, which is awesome. Still got a few things to do. It's mainly unlocking things and buying things in the shop, so I'm slowly doing that, but I'm glad that I pretty much have almost every single PS4 game I own platinumed and done pretty much everything I wanted to do, so that's pretty positive. I only managed to watch 2 films because, like I said, I've been pretty busy. One of the other main projects I've been doing is kind of working on changing some things regarding this podcast and other projects I want to do in the future, but more on that hopefully later on in the year. The 2 films I did watch, however, was a 2000 film titled Sexy Beast. This is a pretty interesting gangster film, as it did come in the 2000s, and it's quite funny that it essentially follows a gangster or criminal who has essentially retired to Spain and kind of lives out the rest of his day there with his wife and other gangster friends and such, which is pretty interesting given that I kind of feel like this film may have unintentionally inspired a lot of people who did live in England who now live out in Spain, to kind of live that said lifestyle, because a lot of those people who have moved from England to Spain have done so simply because they can't stand the weather here. Each to their own, but I think that's a pretty interesting thing that kind of makes this film almost, I was going to say referential, but I don't want to say the word like, predicted the future, because I think that's such an overused phrase, but it's interesting to see that. And it was a pretty interesting film, given that it mainly isn't necessarily about this gangster, doing one more job or being brought back to do one more job. It's more about the conflict and the situation of him almost being forced to come back out of retirement and not necessarily wanting to. And it more or less revolves around that idea of not wanting to come back to that lifestyle and whether or not you have a choice, which I thought was an interesting premise to base your film on. So I'd really recommend it if you want to see a slightly more interesting gangster, British gangster kind of film. The second film I watched, which is one that I've been looking forward to for a while, and it is a very strange film, I will warn you now, and I'll probably warn you again a good few other couple of times, and that is The Greasy Strangler from 2016. This film essentially feels like if Tim and Eric from Adult Swim's Tim and Eric's awesome show Good Job essentially made a slasher-ish horror film, because there are elements of that. And as to what this film is about, which I will not spoil, because it's a much newer film, technically. Essentially, the clue's in the title. There's going to be grease, and there's going to be strangling in this film. If you are not a fan of seeing greasy foods, possibly don't watch this film. If you're not a fan of seeing people being strangled, to put it politely, don't watch this film. If you are also just not a fan of depictions of nudity and genitalia, do not watch this film. Personally, I thought this film was pretty funny and pretty silly. Not a perfect film, but certainly a very unique film, given that it's a film that essentially follows a father and son revolving around this whole idea of a greasy strangler serial killer. And I won't really go into it too much further, but it is very odd. All the things I've just mentioned are in the film, so if you're not a fan of that, this is not going to be a film for you. But if you are a fan of more Adult Swim, weird, silly, kind of gross out stuff, I would highly recommend this film. It'd be right up your streak. And that's pretty much it that what I've been watching and doing as the past fortnight. But sticking with video games, over the last fortnight, things have been getting pretty crazy in terms of video game and media-based content, as we're going to talk about a little bit later on in this podcast, because yes, there is going to be a discussion on this podcast. Everyone kind of has their kind of alternative for there being no gaming conventions or E3, and the first of which is essentially the Summer Game Fest, which kicked off pretty much at the beginning of May, which had some reveals, which I'm going to talk about, not all of them, although they have stated there's going to be many more reveals coming very soon, so if they're interesting, I'll definitely be talking about them. But these two I wanted to chime in with. The first, which I guess had a lot of people somewhat excited, more kind of suspicious, was the fact that there's going to be the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2 remake coming out this year and pretty soon for current gen consoles. This had kind of been rumored for a little while now, so it wasn't really a surprise to see it actually happen. But before everyone kind of starts getting all nostalgic about like the original Tony Hawk Pro Skater games and how everyone played them on the PS1 and all that kind of stuff and what it did for the sport of skateboarding, I think it's best to not forget that 5 years ago, Activision, the publishers, essentially putting out this game, put out Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5, which was a broken and empty game that essentially forced you to play online. It was a mess. It got bombed in terms of like critics and sales. So you can imagine that I am less than hyped for this game, given that this could very easily be a repeat. If you don't know what I'm talking about, just look up any video on Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5 and you'll immediately see that there is something very clearly wrong with that game and how lazy and how poorly put together it was. You don't even have to like video games to know that it's a bad video game, honestly. But despite that, I'll be honest, it does look nice. It doesn't look like the most groundbreaking or mind-blowing thing ever, especially for a more realistic sports game. They don't really exist as much, given the fact that the gaming industry isn't as strong as it used to be anymore, so there isn't really room for, more creative and more oddball sport games, much like there were in the late 90s and early 2000s. But it is kind of interesting. I would like to see it be a bit more creative. I hope it's just not a safe and faithful remake, like bare bones, just exactly how you remember it, just in 720p, condition. It would be nice if there was some more like additions and twists, like in the trailer. I think they kind of hint at the idea that you'll be dodging cars while you're skating, which I think is a really cool idea. I definitely want to see more like environmental challenges, for example, like said the cars. And I also do hope that the series kind of sticks to its staple of having the one kind of joke skater character that's kind of put in. You've had other characters like Darth Maul, Spider-Man, even Shrek has been a playable character in the previous Tony Hawk Pro Skater-esque games. So I kind of hope that we'll see someone like that, maybe given that Activision owns the rights to the Tony Hawk games. Maybe we'll see someone like Crash Bandicoot, or maybe even someone out of left field. I think that'd be pretty cool if they kind of, reminisce, and not necessarily reminisce, but kind of reference the good old days and hopefully put out a game that's as good as those older games, because at this point right now they're pretty much considered classics. So we'll see. Remakes of games can go either one way. They can either go the Crash Bandicoot-esque Resident Evil 2 route, or they can go down the completely lazy route where they're just completely forgotten about, very much like the Final Fantasy VII remake, which does too much and too little at the same time. But I'm not going to get into that because I know people are going to start bitching and complaining about that. But let's move on to something else, which isn't quite a game, but essentially more what the future of gaming could be, given that we finally got to see Unreal Engine 5's tech demo, as well as essentially what gameplay on PlayStation 5 might look like, which is obviously a big deal for a lot of people. Personally, for me, I've never really cared about graphical power. It's always been about the game and whether it's fun. Like, I could play a game as long as it's running at least a nice frame rate. I don't really care what it looks like, personally. But it is... Because the thing with this tech demo is I was kind of debating even talking about it for the most part, but there really isn't much to say about it. Like, yeah, it's pretty. I won't deny it. It's very nice looking. But it's basically an animated video with commentary from two men gushing over how much they love their work. You know, they have every right to be excited and, you know, go over the details of what they've essentially created, because it is worth being proud of. I'm not going to take that away from them. But it's just, you know, it's whatever at the end of the day. I mean, it still looks like a video game. It doesn't look like real life. I can tell it's a video game. You know, I don't really see the big deal. And I think people freaking out as to how beautiful it looks, they honestly really need to calm down, because not every single game is going to look like this. This is not going to be the standard. This is probably just going to be the minimum, which, you know, isn't that much more impressive or as big of a jump as it is for what people were able to do on PC or the PS4. So, you know, whatever. I mean, I could barely even watch this 10-minute kind of demo reel simply because my internet connection was struggling to play it at 2160p 4K. So, you know, there's something. It definitely needs to... what was I going to say? It's definitely interesting, but it's nothing super special. What it is as of right now being a simple tech demo, I'm not considering this a game. I'm just considering it what you can do. And that's what's ultimately interesting about it, is the possibilities of what could happen. I mean, it has me excited about like what the possibilities of what you could do with character design, for example. Clearly within this tech demo, if you watch it, it's only 10 minutes long, and even if you're not into video games, it's probably interesting to have a look at it just so you know where the future of technology may be going if you're interested in that. And yeah, they've clearly mastered environment design and lighting. It's modeling and clever small details on character, which will hopefully kind of really highlight the creativity of game design in the future. That's what I really hope for, and what I hope that this does. And just imagining how specific franchises might look in this engine, such as the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise could look. It's pretty interesting. I mean, I do honestly wonder whether a lot of games that have kind of looked a certain way, whether they're going to translate well into this slightly nicer looking, you know, engine. It is an interesting situation. It was a weird choice watching the tech demo, though. I mean, it did look nice. The environments looked quite nice. I think the lighting looked very good at some points. Other points it was just like, it's whatever. But it was a really weird choice that they gave the main character these really big cartoon-like eyes when her model is so close to like human photorealistic. That was a bit odd, because the moment you see her eyes, you just immediately pulled out and you're just like, oh, that's not a human, that's a video game. Which is a shame, but I understand. It's a tech demo. It's an example of what you can do. But honestly, it doesn't necessarily make me want to buy a PlayStation 5 like so many people are screaming about. And it's honestly not that big of a deal, because it's not a video game. It's not interesting. But worth talking about, I will say. Staying with video games for now, we have the not to be outdone was Microsoft with Inside Xbox, which was the presentation that was essentially live streamed on the 7th of May 2020, And this essentially went and showed off gameplay of some of the games that are going to be on the awesomely titled Xbox Series X. Still a really stupid name to call your console. But I digress. I'm only going to talk about 2 trailers. I'm going to put the full, roughly half an hour presentation in the download link and the description so you can watch it all and see all the other trailers I'm not going to talk about. But the 2 ones I wanted to quickly talk about were the trailer for Scorn, which is taking massive inspiration or is based entirely on the art of H.R. Giger, or Geiger, however you want to say his name. If you're not a fan of 1979's Alien, maybe don't watch this trailer because it seems like it's very much in the same vein as that. I mean, it's pretty cool, and it's rather refreshing for a survival horror game to be basing itself on someone else as opposed to another Lovecraft-inspired project. I'm kind of sick of Lovecraft being thrown into projects as a kind of buzzword. It's kind of annoying, and a lot of them just haven't really lived up to the hype of Cthulhu or, Lovecraft as a name or a brand, as it pretty much is now. And interestingly enough, the aesthetic and the environment and the way this game kind of presents itself, because there is no gameplay, we have no idea how exactly you're going to be playing this game or what you're going to be doing, but it definitely did remind me of the 2018 game called Agony. Now, once again, if you're not a fan of nudity or violence or demonology or pretty much grim, disturbing, demonic stuff, maybe don't look that game up because it is full frontal with that kind of stuff. You are essentially in hell, dealing with demons, dealing with demonic beings and demonic design. It's a super demonic game that really doubled down on the idea of you are in hell. And that's the first thing I thought of when I saw this. I just hope that, unlike Agony, which was pretty much style over substance, this game actually has a sense of substance as opposed to this game simply just being, look, we love H.R. Geiger's work. So it's got some potential. I just need to see some more gameplay from it, because it is pretty interesting. Another game that I wanted to highlight, which kind of had me more upset more than interested, was The Medium. Now, I can't get too excited over this game because it's clearly Silent Hill influenced to an extreme degree, which I'm going to go into. But the main problem I have with this game is it's being made by Bloompa Team, or Bloompa Team. No, it is Bloompa Team. Who made the awful Layers of Fear games, as well as the really, really bad Blair Witch game. This team, all they really seem to do, or their understanding of horror or survival horror, is just building up to cheap jump scares, because that's all their games, or at least their last couple of games, have just been. They've just been, oh, things are getting spooky, oh, cheap jump scare, oh, we're scary. And this game kind of looks like the same. Like, to be fair, they look like they're trying this time, but it's just so blatantly obviously trying to be Silent Hill, which is a bit upsetting to some extent. Now, I'm not trying to say they cannot be inspired or take inspiration from Silent Hill. By all means, be inspired, look at the greats. But when it's that transparent that you have Silent Hill, so close to your sleeve, I can't really call this game original or get excited for it, especially coming from a team that I consider to be so inexperienced. No disrespect to the team, it's just you guys aren't really making what I would personally consider survival horror or a scary game. Cheap isn't always effective, but even the cutscenes or the way the characters move or their animations is very much like the Silent Hill games, which is really distracting for me. Like, it just looks like a really poor aping of Silent Hill, and I want this game to be a bit more original, because there are some original and interesting concepts, kind of hinted at the trailer. I mean, some of this stuff isn't really confirmed, but I do like the idea that the main character kind of gets visions, and that has a lot of potentials. Maybe she sees visions of the future, maybe she sees certain outcomes, maybe there's things the player can prevent through these visions. That's a pretty cool concept, especially if the world later on goes to complete hell. That's a great concept that you could really run with and kind of, do so much with. That's a really exciting idea. Also, the fact that the original composer for the first 4 Silent Hill games, he's doing the music for this game, which is pretty interesting. So at least the game has one thing going for it, that it will most likely have a good soundtrack. And yeah, that's one thing that, that's unfortunately the only things I do like about it. It's a very brief trailer, and, it just screams Silent Hill, and I just want it to be more original. I want more originality, especially given that there's never going to be another Silent Hill game, and especially given how big Silent Hill is. But yeah, that's going to pretty much do with, I almost forgot the word, video games for now. Let's actually move on to a few mentions of 2 trailers which I thought were pretty interesting, that pretty much have a nice kind of similarity and theming to them. Okay, sorry about that. I had to make a quick cut and do something. Yeah, let's talk about the first trailer, which is, these are both Netflix trailers, but I thought they were interesting enough as mentions themselves. The first one we have is Have a Good Trip, which is essentially a more talking heads documentary about celebrities, famous people, talking about that one time they got high or did drugs, which isn't necessarily a new thing. Other YouTube channels like Vice and a few others that I can't remember of, they've done these mini videos in which they have illustrated or animated videos, essentially, showing or describing this person's, acid trip or LSD trip or weed trip, which is, interesting and fun, especially if it's someone you like, but it's nothing original. I do like in this film that they are kind of talking about not necessarily the benefits of it, but more or less the experiences of these people and why they would never do it again or wouldn't do it again. I think that's kind of an interesting concept, and I guess given how weed culture is now more popular than ever with, 420, ha ha ha, and all that kind of stupidness, I guess it's fitting that Netflix would have a series or documentary film like this. I mean, I do like the idea of them possibly using a different animation style for each person describing or telling the story of said acid trip. I think that's a pretty cool concept, and it will definitely keep the film or TV series very fresh. But once again, it's nothing necessarily original because Vice has done it, other people have done it, essentially animating my acid trip, essentially. But I feel like it's definitely going to be one of those documentaries that everyone watches over the weekend and then completely forgets about. So, and I guess it could be informative for a lot of younger audiences who aren't necessarily aware of, I wouldn't say the benefits nor the dangers, but I guess the experiences that can come with drugs. Drugs, in my opinion, are just a waste of money if they're not essentially curing you of anything. So yeah, I don't know. I doubt it's really pushing for like the legalization of LSD, because LSD is one of those drugs that can mess you up forever. But we'll see. The other trailer I want to talk about, interesting enough, staying with the drug theme, is White Lines. This is essentially a TV series that kind of is set in Ibiza, which seems to kind of follow the connections of the several people regarding one particular person's brother who ends up being killed, and there's kind of like a mystery. It's kind of a whodunit, but it seems to go into a little bit more of a exploitationist. It's kind of a weird one to describe. I know even in the trailer they say, oh, it's like Cluedo, but it seems like it's going to be going more places, maybe more darker places, like people losing themselves and that kind of stuff. It looked interesting. It had a nice sense of style and progression without being too showboaty. There were some very nice particular shots that looked very interesting. A lot of the kind of rave party scenes, they were lit in a very interesting way, to the point where we could actually see things, because if you've ever been to a rave, you can't see anything. But the way they did it was pretty cool. And even the characters, although they seem like they could just be a bunch of backstabbers, and the whole series will just be like, I stabbed you, you stabbed me, all this kind of stuff, and kind of going back to the reference of it just basically being a whodidit kind of story with a more of a mystery kind of element there, or more drug dealing, I guess. It could be interesting. I did like some of the scenes and the shots, and I am interested to see if this series is anything. I know they're trying to hype out the fact that this is from the same director who did some other series, but I've never watched that series, and yeah, I'm just going into this person's work blank, so we'll see. But that's pretty much going to be the last trailer we have for this podcast, but we do have a discussion which was recorded a while ago, and it is going to be a discussion. I won't say I'm going to let the past Raccoon talk about it, but it's essentially me and Ace talking about a particular topic, essentially a little bit closer to when it was a bit of a bigger deal. And given the things that I've talked about and are possibly going to be talking about in the future, I think it's probably best that I hand it over to past Raccoon for this discussion. Alright, thanks, future Raccoon. I'm joined with Ace, as I'm sure he's already stated.
Howdy.
And we're going to be doing a discussion talking about the fact that E3, the Electronic Convention, or whatever it's really called, Electronic Expo?
It's something like that. The E's, there are 3 E's, obviously, hence by the name, but I don't know what they stand for.
Yeah, we're not really prepared for... well, we don't have all the facts.
I think it's Electronic Entertainment Expo or something.
Yeah, I just always called it Electronic Expo.
Yeah, it's fair enough. E2's good.
Yeah, it wouldn't quite work out. But, yeah, we're going to be doing a discussion talking about the fact that, given that certain events have happened, it seems as though E3 may not be happening at all or ever again.
Yeah, the whole coronavirus, like COVID-19 situation, which I'm sure everyone's a bit sick of hearing about, it's changed a lot at the moment. Big time.
It's, I mean, the way we're looking at things right now, it's certainly changed a lot of things almost indefinitely. And, yeah.
With, E3 essentially having been cancelled, and the organisation behind them, being the Entertainment Software Association, planning to do something digitally, which that just fell through. IGN basically picking up that kind of slack.
Yeah, they did, which is quite interesting at the same time, because they've kind of almost out of nowhere come together with this, I forget what they call it exactly, but it's the...
IGN Summer of Gaming.
Yeah, Summer of Gaming, which is essentially going to be happening on June, and I guess we'll put this in the download link and the description in case you want to see the video as for what they're essentially going to be suggesting. But it looks like they'll be presenting E3 to some extent.
Yeah, it's really weird, because you'd kind of expect each individual company maybe just doing their own online thing, like Sony I think were planning on doing anyway, because they said they weren't going to be at this year's E3.
Yeah, it is quite interesting because there is still rumors regarding Microsoft and Sony saying that very soon they're going to be showing off their new console. So, maybe this might be a more interesting or better opportunity for them to kind of get in quick, get all the hype with, the new consoles, and then present all the new games at the E3 that will be, or, IGN presents, 2 or 3 months later.
Yeah, and also a digital expo, essentially. It means that people who attend aren't necessarily any different from those who watch something later on, because you're not getting any freebies, you're not having your opinion changed by appearance of the actual location.
Yeah,
so it's far more of a equal, I guess, viewing of things.
Which is what it kind of should be, because I know a lot of people, when this did come out, I know a lot of people were very much like, oh, E3's never going to happen, I never got to go, and a lot of people had been going, being like, yeah, there's very little you can actually play there.
Yeah, it's mostly just, hey, this is going to be cool, make sure everyone knows it's going to be cool.
Yeah.
And that's kind of it.
Press, because one thing that was really upsetting, which I really hated about, some kind of E3 press coverage, was the fact that they would just be like, yeah, we saw the new game, but we can't say anything about it.
Yeah, exactly, which it's always an annoying thing to read.
Yeah, like I think the one that annoyed me the most, well, it wasn't annoying, but it was just like something that I wish I could have done, was I think the one for Resident Evil 2 Remake, Now, it wasn't necessarily seeing more gameplay that annoyed me, it was the fact that they had essentially reconstructed part of the police station.
Oh, right.
And yeah, there was no filming or photography allowed in that. But everyone was like, oh, it's so cool, it's so accurate. And I was like, damn, wish I could have seen that.
Yeah, it'd be nice if people who are going to buy the game actually got to see some stuff.
Yeah. And then you have Nintendo on the opposite end, where they essentially recreated elements from Animal Crossing, and everyone could, play the game and be there.
Oh, that's so cool.
So it is an interesting situation, because we are at a bit of a conundrum where it's like, are we really going to miss E3 to some extent?
It's one of those weird situations, because it's always been a staple of essentially gaming events.
Mm-hmm.
But most people that I know who watch anything related to it, it's more just to take the piss.
Oh, yeah.
And essentially, if there's any cool game stuff, they'll just watch those trailers or watch the actual game trailer stuff the next day when they're all out. So, it as an actual event, I don't see what really keeps it.
So it's kind of talking about its like longevity and, whether it was really going to last that much longer anyway.
Yeah. It's one of the weird things, especially considering, as already said, Sony were planning on leaving this year.
Mm-hmm.
So if that happens, if Microsoft then decided they were going to leave the same year or the next year or something, then you can't lose into the big ones.
Yeah, you would lose, if everyone, if one, big player pulls out, then, the rest are going to. I mean, Nintendo technically were already doing their own thing for, a good couple years.
Yeah.
I partly think that the reason Sony didn't attend last year's E3 was because they honestly had nothing.
Yeah, it's extremely possible.
Because, and I think that's become very evident in recent time, because they've been very quiet. And yes, you can say, oh, they're working on PlayStation 5. I'm sure they are, and I'm sure they want it to be the best thing ever made, but they haven't had a lot of exclusives. And even very recently, I think they've just randomly just gone, oh yeah, Last of Us 2, it comes out in 2 months time. Ghost of Tsushima comes out in like 3 months time. Like we have seen nothing on that Ghost of Tsushima or whatever you say its name.
I believe.
Yeah, and that game is coming out in 3 months' time.
Yeah, you think maybe they'd at least have another trailer or something to...
I mean, not to say they can't release a ton of trailers in the next few months.
It's true, but then it would feel like overkill.
It's true. But yeah, it is a very interesting situation, because there are positives with the fact that obviously a ton of money is going to be saved. Obviously it is inclusive, like you've already mentioned. Everyone feels equal in that right. But I guess at the same time, the things that I guess we'll miss from E3 is, I guess, the big reveals to some extent.
Yeah, those, they had a certain pomp and circumstance that actually made it engaging. You'd be like, oh, that's it, and then extra trailer just pops out of nowhere. Those are some of the most memorable things.
I'm talking about moments like, let me keep an example, like, oh, it's out today, those kinds of things. And I think, moments, not necessarily like the cringy stuff, because there's always going to be like really cringy stuff in these kinds of events, but I think like the general hype of the audience.
Yeah, it is a weird thing. I mean, I think the modern equivalent would basically be just, the text you get on the side of live streams. And when you watch it, you can see the text as it happened.
But that doesn't have the same oomph.
Yeah.
Because it's text is very soulless.
Yeah.
And
by comparison.
And at the same time, I'm not saying I love it when I hear a crowd screaming over the audio of something I'm trying to hear, but I mean, just kind of going back to this discussion and doing a bit of research, I went and watched. I don't mean to keep banging on about this game, but it's just a good reference. people's first reaction to seeing the Resident Evil 2 remake trailer.
Yeah.
Which is still a fantastic trailer because you don't know what's going on, and the moment everyone sees Leon, everyone just goes absolutely apeshit. And it's just that won't be replicated in the text chat.
No, that's true. I mean, you'd get the equivalent of people just all caps Leon
with the occasional racist comment.
Oh god.
Because there's always that one guy who's just like, "Oh, this looks like cancer."
Yeah, I think that's the good thing of a live audience by comparison. You're not really going to hear racial slurs or sexism thrown out.
Yeah, so there's the good and the bad. But those are things that I'm kind of going to miss. But I guess we can kind of, almost in some definitive way, can we answer the question of, is E3 done forever, and do we need it?
I don't think it'd be done forever. Whether it continues how it was, or whether it goes back to how it used to be, where it was just backstage for investors and stuff like that, I don't know.
Okay.
I'm really not good at these kind of premonition or like precognition stuff.
No, that's fine. I wasn't expecting a definitive answer.
Yeah.
I mean, as of right now, the way I see it, I think next year there will definitely be an E3.
Yeah, I can see that.
I don't see there being an E3 in 2026.
Okay.
Simply, because I think with the whole IGN's summer showcase, which we're going to talk about in a second, I think we're going to kind of have that, and everyone's kind of gonna go, oh yeah, there's nice filler, and then I think there's going to be the hype for next year.
Yeah.
And obviously that's when everyone's like, oh, new games, PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X, I want to see it on the big screen, I think there's definitely going to be the resurgence.
Yeah, and I won't be surprised if there's like just viewing parties like people do now when they just watch E3 streams.
Yeah, which I've watched, which is quite funny.
Yeah.
I think that's probably what's going to happen. I don't necessarily think E3 is needed.
No, I mean, you've already got other equivalents, like PAX exists.
Which sometimes some of the hypest stuff comes from PAX.
Yeah.
Or, I forget what the other one is. It's a little bit, I know it's set in Japan, but I can't remember its name. There is another equivalent, which usually has some hype stuff.
German one.
Sorry?
Wasn't there a German Game Expo thing?
That's not PAX, is it?
No, that's a Penny Arcade. Gamescom.
Gamescom, yeah. Yeah, which, it is interesting. That's kind of why I see things going. I don't think it's necessarily needed because, for example, I know we were talking about this earlier, when they showed off Watch Dogs 3.
Oh, yeah.
The YouTuber, the Rad Brad, he was already given the gameplay demo before they showed it off at E3.
Yeah.
So it was already up. Like, I literally remember being on YouTube and seeing in my subscription feed Watch Dogs 3 Legion, and I was like, what the hell is this? Then 2-2's, IGN or whoever, had uploaded the trailer and the demo like 5 hours later.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, oh, okay. Like,
yeah.
And I don't think it was the case if he got in trouble for doing that. I think it was they gave it to him and were like, here, you can, talk about it and do commentary over it.
Yeah.
And I think maybe that's probably what we're going to see in the years to come, where it's just people like him or other YouTubers who are a big fan of a certain series and just being like, hey, as soon as you're a loyal customer, here's, the preview. What do you think? That might be the evolution of things because, studios and developers, they know that people do, the playthroughs and that. And it's basically free advertising.
It's kind of like how journalism, like journalists and journalist sites, they'd be given certain essentially extras based on how they treat certain companies. Not necessarily, I'm not saying they're being bought off or anything.
No.
Not a conspiracy theorist. And if they're negative towards them, they can be blacklisted.
Yeah, and it can happen, and it's, to some extent it's understandable. I'm not justifying the whole idea of, buying people off, but I completely get it if you are very positive to someone and they give you negatives, I can understand why you'd be a bit like, hey, I don't want to do business with you.
Yeah, exactly.
But
yeah, I think like online personalities, like as mentioned, Red, they end up being far more engaging to customers than a lot of journalist sites at the moment, like IGN, etc.
Yeah,
there's been a lot of backlash towards those kind of things. So
yes, and there is and I think given the way that YouTube is kind of structured to deal with that kind of stuff, it's very easy and very simple to say, hey, Ubisoft gave me this gameplay to look at. This is paid promotional material. You know what you're getting. Here it is. Look at it if you want to. If not, I'll be continuing my playthrough of a part that's going up in a few hours.
Yeah.
Do you care about, Watch Dogs 3? No? Okay, cool. Here's the next part of this game.
Yeah.
And I think that's what might happen, but I still see there maybe being, kind of going back to the ideas you were mentioning, like a more of a digital thing.
Yeah, a lot of things are moving to it now, so yeah, it's just one of the things that's going to happen as years go on.
Yeah, and I think, I guess, as to almost like kind of wrap up this discussion and kind of talk about everything that is happening with this whole situation, we're kind of brought back to IGN's Summer Showcase.
Yes.
And what this could mean. Because it is an interesting situation, because IGN just come out of nowhere and be like, yep, we're hosting E3 now. And it makes sense. I mean, they have the biggest reputation, or they're probably one of the only people who could do this in theory.
Yeah, and considering they already have so many connections and they have the notoriety.
Yes, that's the word I was looking for.
It makes a lot of sense for them to be the people who essentially, as I said earlier, take up the slack.
To some extent. And we're not like, throwing shade at the organisers of E3 when we say that.
No, I don't know anything about them as an organisation, so yeah.
And it is interesting. The most interesting thing about the situation is who's going to be presenting and who's not.
Yeah. As far as I've seen, Damon Hatfield is on the video announcing it, so I don't know if he's going to be one of the announcers on the actual thing or not. I don't know. I don't know who's currently an IGN essentially center person.
I completely know what you mean. I kind of meant more like publishers and developers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I believe CD Projekt Red are going to be there.
They've announced that. They're going to delay Cyberpunk 2077 again. That's the big announcement.
It was going to come out late this year anyway, so yeah, I think they're just going to announce it there.
Yeah, they're going to announce October 21st, 2022.
What a time to be alive.
Yeah, I mean, quick side note, I don't think anything good's going to come of that game, but hopefully it does get released.
Yeah. No, I'm intrigued to see what they do, whether it can kind of stack up to Deus Ex at all.
I don't think it will.
Probably not, but it'd be interesting to see.
I mean, I think they are worrying about the wrong things.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest problem. Like, if one comment is making you rework the whole game, that's not a good sign.
I don't think I've heard of this.
Long story short, basically a journalist couldn't tell what the gender of a character was. So
Right.
the development team freaked out and removed the option to have a male and female character.
But they still have male and female characters.
I think that got scrapped, unfortunately, or it's been reworked to not upset this one person.
I haven't heard of this. So
Something like that. They've been making a lot of changes and removing a lot of things because people have been saying things or stuff like that.
Right. Okay.
It's I don't have all the facts, but from what I remember, they had to change something regarding like appearance and like gender image or something like that, and it basically made it so that they had to rework something.
I've got it here. They don't have binary gender options. You just make the character body as you want, which I'm fine with.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that, but clearly, other people will have a problem. And I think it was something to do with like a poster or something like that. They removed the poster because people couldn't tell the gender of the character, so they just removed it.
Fair enough.
Which is a bit odd.
I don't know about that circumstance. So
yeah, it was something. It was definitely like the whole your character thing, and then it was definitely. I think it was someone, a journalist was like, or someone was saying, I can't tell the gender of this person in a poster, and they saw it and they freaked out and removed it.
Right. Okay.
Which, in my opinion, is not really something to worry about, but whatever. I understand you want everyone to play this game. I get it, but
Yeah, companies are very, very much trying to sell to people.
Which is fine. There is, you can pander in a good way.
Yeah, you totally can. And there's a lot of awful versions. One thing we might actually be talking about soon.
Oh, yes. But I mean, the people who's going to be there should be very interesting, because it'd be nice to actually, kind of figure some things out and go, oh, if they're not here, maybe they're working on this and that, and what does it mean that this company's here? And this is where we can kind of go into a little bit more of speculation to some extent.
Yeah.
Because the one thing I'm interested in, or the company I'm the most interested in as of right now, because there are so many rumors regarding them, is Activision.
Ooh, okay.
Now, I hate Activision.
Yeah.
But it is very interesting that there have been a lot of rumors about a possible next Crash game, Crash Bandicoot.
Okay.
Possible rumors about a next Spyro game.
Okay.
People have done the working out, and typically Activision tend to announce things around about April or so. So people are, speculating that maybe at E3 we're going to see the next Crash or Spyro game, which will probably launch this year.
Yeah.
But the thing I'm the most hyped for is the next Call of Duty. No, I'm joking.
Are you sure?
No. So I'm interested to see, maybe that might be a good venture for them to go, hey, because Activision being as big as a company as they are, they might not have thought that, showcasing Crash would have had the biggest draw to some extent.
Yeah.
And maybe with something smaller, they maybe can go in a little harder with, hey, here's the new Crash game. Because maybe this new Crash game is a bit of a risky thing.
Yeah.
And
despite
maybe
the fact that it's so beloved at the moment, it's still considered risky.
It is still risky for them, unfortunately, because I mean, the two new Crash games, I mean, collectively, I think they've made maybe about 15, 18 million together, which nothing to scoff at, but in Activision's eyes, it's not Call of Duty money.
Yeah.
And maybe they've given whoever's working on this possible next game a little bit more freedom, and maybe they've gone a bit new with it, and maybe Activision's like, oh, I don't know about this. But
I mean, it could be anything, really.
It could be anything. As long as it's good, I'm happy.
Yeah. As long as it's not just something really dull.
Yeah, I don't want it to be anything dull. Speculation about Capcom as well.
Ooh, okay.
Obviously, a lot of people, after Resident Evil 3 Remake came out, people were like, Dino Crisis Remake.
Oh, I would actually love that.
It's that whole idea has kind of been confirmed and not confirmed at the same time.
Okay.
So, Dino Crisis in the RE engine, given how beautiful that looks, I'm down for. I'm hoping that this Dino Crisis Remake will probably be the next stopgap between the next Resident Evil game.
Yeah.
On the other side as well, maybe they might use this smaller IGN event to go, here's free DLC for Resident Evil 3.
Yeah.
That might be a possibility. Or they might just surprise us with something new. They might bring something back.
Yeah.
Because Capcom sits on, like, a massive wealth.
Well, you never know. They might bring Darkstalkers back.
They might. There was a few references to Darkstalkers in Resident Evil 3 Remake.
I think I saw one or two of those, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, so I'm interested in that. Obviously, I think the one I think you'd most likely be interested in the most would definitely be Warner Brothers.
Yes, yeah, I was going to say about this.
Yeah, go on.
Warner Brothers for E3, they were going to announce the new Batman game, which by Warner Brothers Montreal, who did Batman Arkham Origins.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully they could be there to announce that, and also a Harry Potter RPG, which being an open world Harry Potter kind of game, which I'd find fascinating.
Especially, yeah, go on.
I used to play a lot of like the RPG stuff on the Game Boy for Harry Potter, which were amazing.
Yeah, those were fairly underrated games.
Very. People need to play them. And there's also Rocksteady having a new game, which, considering they're affiliated with Warner Brothers in some manner, I believe, that'd be great to see.
Yeah, any speculations on what it could be?
Ooh, I've heard an awful rumor that it's going to be a multiplayer game.
Oh,
I
think we have enough of those.
Yeah, and if I'm correct, the rumor was about like an asymmetrical multiplayer game, which we clearly don't have enough of those at the moment, do we?
Yeah, no, I would rather go back to the very old school rumor that Rocksteady is working on a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game.
That would be great. I'd be happy for that.
Rocksteady.
It's literally the name.
The only thing is, I think Nickelodeon owns the rights to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Right. Okay.
So Warner Brothers, I think Warner Brothers is a Time Warner company. Nickelodeon is a Viacom company.
Don't Time Warner and Viacom have some sort of affiliation, or am I mistaken?
They're different companies, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
I think they're two of the biggest, but I think they're different, if I remember correctly.
I thought they had something going on, but I could be very wrong.
They hate each other.
They have a minor deal apparently with something, but I have no idea what, so I'm not going to get into that.
Another thing I'd be very interested in. My last kind of speculation would be I'd love to see something from Sega.
Oh, that'd be nice.
It's been a while.
Yeah, what was the last Sega game? Did Sega do Yakuza?
Yeah, they do Yakuza, yeah.
Okay, because the new one, something like a dragon.
I don't know.
Okay, I'm interested in that because it's a turn-based RPG, which is amazing.
Yeah, it is interesting. I'm interested to see if Sega will do anything, because I think the last thing they released was like obviously a Yakuza game and then the Sonic racing game.
Oh yeah.
Whatever that was called, I can't remember right now.
Sonic Team Racing?
It might have been that, I don't know.
I think it was a really basic name, but yeah, I almost forgot that existed.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see if they do anything new with Sonic, because obviously Sonic's in a pretty interesting situation. Obviously coming off Sonic Mania and then Sonic Forces. I'd be interested to see if they... I mean, I don't really know. With Sonic, you never know what you're going to get.
No, it could be... They could go back to stuff like the Black Knight or Seven... Was it Seven Rings or Secret Rings?
Secret Rings, yeah.
Could go to something like that. Sonic's a weird ball at the moment.
Yeah, in more ways than one.
I'm
go on.
Very intrigued in, like, I hope there's something there.
Yeah.
The White Owls, which is Swery's company.
Oh yeah.
Because I'd love to hear more about The Good Life and Deadly Premonition 2.
Yes, that's true. I mean, I'm not even sure, I can't remember via the video, but I'm not sure if Nintendo was really highlighting that little preview. I can't remember. Because isn't both The Good Life and Deadly Premonitions 2 going to be on Switch?
I think they're going to be on... I think Deadly Premonition 2 might be Switch only, but I think Good Life's going to be on multiple things.
Yeah. So it makes sense, because Swery could do like his own little thing within Nintendo.
Yeah.
But I'm interested in that because that game looks like it's going to be great. Nintendo, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, there's only like 3 key players in terms of video games right now. That's definitely Nintendo, Doom Eternal, and Capcom with Resident Evil. I mean,
For me, basically, are you a game from the 90s or the early 2000s? That's it.
yeah, pretty much. I mean, to think that one of the, I mean, I can't even describe. Those are the 3 best games out right now,
Yeah.
in my opinion. Hopefully, there will be more.
Yeah, I mean, XCOM just came out, which I'm planning on playing that tomorrow, so...
That might be number 4.
Yeah, or for me, number 1.
Well, I mean, in terms of like total number.
Oh yeah. And then this kind of this indie game Cloudpunk just came out, which I've been hyped for a while, and I've heard good things about. So yeah,
It's interesting, but yeah, I mean, Nintendo could finally throw a really massive surprise. Nintendo has a lot of things they're working on, which we still haven't seen anything about. Metroid Prime 4, of course, is I think the biggest one.
Zelda Breath of the Wild 2.
Yep. Which we still have nothing on. And I mean, they could even just throw out a completely brand new game. Bayonetta 3, we've seen nothing on yet.
Yeah, and there's No More Heroes 3 as well.
No More Heroes 3, which is, now that Resident Evil 3 is out, that's like the most anticipated game, period. Because I think that game is going to be a masterpiece.
Oh, okay.
Given how much effort went into just that reveal trailer alone.
Yeah.
I mean, do your I'm pretty sure I talked about it on the podcast, but do your research on everything about that game so far, and you will be shocked.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, is there anything else to add about this E3 situation?
I think we've got some interesting changes going on in the world, and the gaming, I guess, announcement industry. I have no proper terminology for it. That's
marketing, basically.
Yeah, that's the one that's changing the most, it seems.
Yeah, I mean, video games are in a very interesting situation right now.
Yeah.
We've kind of hinted at that, being the fact that I mentioned there's only 3 good games right now. But and I've also noticed it as well, even with you, even with other people, I've noticed a lot of people aren't really playing the new games.
Yeah, it's old school all the way.
Old school. Even myself, I, recently got a PS4. I mean, I've been playing a lot of older games. And I've got probably, I mean, I don't have Doom Eternal, but it's probably the only other new game I want to get right now. But there's tons of other games I want to get as well. I mean, You've got the new Samurai Jack game, the Destroy All Humans remaster, Dayman 1998 could be a sleeper hit.
Oh yeah,
they've
done a few previous games as well, if I'm correct. The person behind Dayman.
Yeah, that studio goes way back.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got to tell you some stuff about that studio after we're done with this discussion.
Go ahead.
But I guess, should we wrap up this discussion and hand it back to Future Raccoon?
Yes, definitely.
All right, then. Well, hopefully you enjoyed this little discussion. I know technically it's not the most newest thing to talk about, but it's worth talking about, especially in this year. And I just want to thank you, Ace, for being on this discussion of hopefully many more.
Yeah, that's cool with me.
Cool, and I guess I will pass it back to Future Raccoon. All right, I hope that the audio was clear enough for you to hear. We did record that over Skype, so apologies if it's not the best audio quality, and sorry for any kind of edits and cuts and all that. It's Skype, it's not the greatest service, and internet is very slow over in this country, just to essentially stop it from collapsing completely. But that's pretty much going to wrap up this podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. Hopefully we come out of this situation pretty soon. I've still got a ton of things to do and a ton of ideas that I want to get down on paper. But before I end this podcast, I'm going to leave you with the video of the episode, which is still once again tying into the theme of video games. Very much a video game centric episode. But even if you're not a big video gamer, I'm sure you'll love this music video. It's going to be Breakbot with Be Mine Tonight. Fantastic animated music video. Really sweet and lovely song actually as well. Quite possibly maybe one of my favorite songs of this year. Definitely one of my favorite music videos so far this year. And I'm going to leave you with that because I just thought it needs more attention, it needs more views, and hopefully you guys all enjoy it. Isn't really anything else to add to this podcast. I know it was a slightly longer one given the discussion me and Ace did back in the past, but hopefully it was fun and a nice distraction away from the misery that is the world right now. And on that note, I will end this podcast like I always do by saying I was the Angry Raccoon, and I will see you on the next podcast.